Hey, it's Robert Evans. We are in Minnesota on Lake Minnetonka in the extreme conditions. It's snowing. We're out here and we are going to shoot the A9 II and the 400-2.8 as well as some other long Sony lenses. Welcome to the Pixel Show. Hello everyone and welcome back into the Pixel Show. I'm your host Robert Evans. And today we're going to talk about what camera should I get? Well, and kind of what lens should I get too. I'm kind of combining them. So let's just jump right in. Today we are talking about the A9. But before we jump into that really quickly, if you haven't seen the show before, here's some of our previous episodes. I would love it if you go back in and watch, comment, and tell us what you think. And we'd always love a subscription and ring that little bell like all the YouTubers say. So we're talking about the A9 II today. Now I shoot a lot of my kids' sports. I shoot weddings. And today, in this episode, I got to use the camera for technically what is a sport, but something completely different than I've ever shot before, which is dog racing, which you shot in the intro. Now, I'm not going to dig into this camera too much and specs and everything. That's not me. I want to show you pictures. I want to talk about the conditions of shooting. But just quickly, this camera, if you shoot sports, definitely 20 frames a second. The calculations that this camera makes in the new A9 II, the autofocus and the auto exposure calculations up to 60 times a second. You can shoot electronic shutter up to 32,000th of a second. Also has anti-flicker built in, which is great if you're shooting indoor with LED lights. The sensor, 93% of the sensor is covered with 693 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection points, as well as this camera does 4D focusing, which is pretty amazing. So it focuses depth, it focuses, fast, wide. You can look up a little bit more if you want to find out more about 4D focusing. Like I said, we want to talk about photography, not necessarily specs, but I just want to give you a brief gist of what this camera can do. 24 megapixel, which is great because especially with shooting sports, sometimes we want to crop in a little more. It allows us to do that. And with the stacked CMOS sensor built into the camera. And I mentioned, even though this is what camera should I get, we're talking about these four lenses. This is the first of two episodes that we're going to do on that. So in the first episode, we are going to talk about the 400-2.8, and we are going to talk about the 24-1.4 G Master. All right, let's go back out to the field. So today we're out here, we're shooting the A9 II, and we're shooting the 400-2.8. Now I shoot a lot of sports. I shoot my kids' sports. I've shot some professional sports, but I've never shot dog racing. So I was super excited to come out here and do this. This is kind of the perfect combo. Of course, you can use some other lenses, but the A9 II specifically, because this morning when I was shooting in the pits, the dog's getting ready. It was snowing pretty hard, and there was a lot of snow on my camera. But the double sensors, the double sealing on this camera is made for these extreme conditions. So we will shoot a few other lenses. But right now we're shooting the 400-2.8. Also, you guys, if you've never heard of these gloves, these are pretty awesome. It's by a company, I hope I say it right, it's called Valorette. And they're actually made for photographers in conditions like this, but they're great because you can take your fingers out of them and then you can actually control your buttons while your hands stay warm. If they get cold, you just pull the little things right back over it and you're back in business. Just to give you some perspective of the environment that we're in, it's probably about 18, 19 degrees. It's just stopped snowing. And we're actually in the middle of a lake. We're standing on a lake. All the people that you see in the background, cars are parked on the lake. The ice houses that you can see over my other shoulder, we're all out on the lake. So this is Minnesota. This is what people do. They ice fish, they dog race, they cross-country ski. But just wanted to give you an idea of where we are. So you got to see the conditions that we were in, out on the lake, standing on a frozen lake with all those people. It was snowing. But so let me just tell you what this was. So I was commissioned, along with many other photographers, to shoot what was called the Klondike Dog Sled Race. And we were each, there were probably 5 or 6 photographers, and we were each sort of assigned to do things that we were best at. Of course, there were parties, and it was a weekend of activities. And so I wanted to shoot the sports side of it. I'm good at that, and I enjoyed it. So that's what I did. But one of the things that I did, so we'll back up a little bit, is shoot the start of the race. So I was, there at the start. This image right here. Is a picture of a guy that I saw in the parking lot. As I literally arrived, I was getting out of my car, and he and I started chatting, and I just asked, I was like, hey, can I take a picture of you? I said, I love, portrait. I love the snow in your beard and your goggles. And he's like, yeah. And he like kind of stood close to me. I'm like, no, you got to back up, because I had the 400 2.8 G Master on my camera, and that's the lens that I was going to commit to shoot the start of the race, because I was going to be down the way in a starting pit. And anyway, so this is a nice portrait I took of him right away. Here it is, a little bit bigger, blown up, so you can see it. But I just love the texture of the snow and everything in his beard. Okay, so here I am on the starting line. Now let me just tell you a little story. There was a media pit that I could be in, and I went and I got in the media pit, and I looked up the street, and I decided that I really didn't like that, because the other thing is I needed to, after I shot the start of the race, I needed to jump in my car and then drive to the spot where we drove out in the lake, which you're going to see in a little bit. So I put myself on the other side of the street, and starting the race, I wanted to show a few things. As a wedding photographer and doing that for years, I think when I shoot sports, I kind of take my wedding abilities into it, where I'm telling a little bit more of a story than also just shooting the action. So as the sleds came down the street, they started 2 minutes apart. And so I had plenty of time. It wasn't like this mad rush, like a horse race where everybody started at once. So again, with the 400 on. Now, when I moved myself to the other side of the street, I had a worse view than I did in the pit, but I would have been stuck and wouldn't have been able to leave. So I made the best of it, although it wasn't my favorite. So one of the things that I did was shoot faces. So again, let's blow this up and see her face nice and big. But look how beautiful that lens is. 400 2.8, I don't know, she's coming at me 10, 15 miles an hour with her dogs pulling her. But along with shooting the dogs, I also wanted to make sure I got some nice portraits of the racers. So here's another one. Again, she's coming down the street. You see a little bit of her dog. You see how beautiful and out of focus the crowd is in the background. You see the snow. But this is something that really surprised me, like how happy all these people were. I mean, why wouldn't they be? We had amazing weather for it, amazing weather for the photos anyway, with the nice snow, and later on it clears up, which you'll see. But I really loved how happy and jovial everyone was. So I really wanted to try to capture that in some of my images. So next image, then I moved positions. I went a little bit further down the street, right as the dogs were coming out onto the lake, and to get a different perspective. So in this image, I've more focused on the dogs. And I'm shooting this at 400, probably 500th of a second, at 2.8 wide open. And now I'm just focusing either on individual dogs, right? Because with that telephoto and a 2.8, you're not going to get a whole lot of depth of field. I really loved this image just because I love the action. These dogs love this. And let me tell you, as I educated myself and talking to people, this was a 40-mile race. And everyone told me that 40 miles is nothing for these dogs. It's just like a jog, like you and I going on a 2-mile jog. And so they're raring to go. They're barking at the start line. They want to go. So this is right as they kind of start to see the wide open space where they can run. One more, I'll just zoom right into this one. Again here, now, as I mentioned before, I was at 2.8 and I realized I'm not gonna have that much depth of field. So I changed and I went to 6.3 at a 200th of a second here. And I was at 100 ISO so that I could show a little more focus of the driver and the dogs all together. Now again, with a 400 millimeter lens, you're not gonna see it front to back, I guess, unless I was up at f11. But I wanted a little bit, I wanted the background to blur a little bit. But again, I wanted to see the driver and the dogs. And so here you see really nice expressions. Now, I moved two more times. I was like, okay, now I have this. Now I want to go to a vantage point where you can really see the amount of people, right? I'm shooting this for the people that run the race. They want to show, like, look at all these people that showed up. So this is part of the storytelling. So I changed my position where I could see these dogs coming down the hill. This is the hill they come down to right before they go out onto the lake. So I did that. So I wanted to show a nice perspective of all the fans and the dogs coming around. So I did that here. And then I moved to another position that I noticed. And again, storytelling and marketing. I changed and it got a little bit closer, but the most important thing of this shot is I wanted to show the signage in the background so that you could see that it was part of the Klondike Dog Derby and that everybody could see that. Again, I'm about 500th of a second, 6.3 at 100 ISO, because I wanted a little focus from front to back to see the musher, I guess is the correct dog term, as well as see some of the people. So you can see, along the left side of the frame, all those people who are in the same focal plane as the driver are in focus, but the people on the right side of the frame in the background are out of focus. So I showed you the beginning of the race. I wanted to back up a little bit and show you some of that story and what I was having to capture. And then I mentioned that I had to be able to get in my car and drive to the location. So that's what I did. I got in my car. I drove out to the lake. We were probably like 500-600 yards out on the shore. Driving on the ice is, everybody does it and it's safe. It still creeps me out a little bit, but I did it anyway because other idiots were doing it. So we drove out to the location. And let's look at some of the images that I shot with the 400 while out on the lake. Here comes another team of dogs, and I can see them. Right now they're like small in the frame, so yeah, you're tempted to shoot this, but I want to wait so they kind of fill the frame a little bit more. So I'm just going to hold. The sun's coming out, which is awesome, so they're going to be side lit. There's a really kind of nice diffused light coming through the clouds right now. He's getting closer, filling my frame a little bit more. I still haven't taken a picture. All right, right about now, I'm gonna shoot a burst. Good. Focus on the dogs. Get a nice picture of the dogs. I'm gonna go right to the musher's face. Okay, so you saw a little footage of me out on the lake shooting the 400. I did have the silent shutter on for a little while until 688 said, Robert, I can't hear the shutter. And I was like, okay, so I did turn it to mechanical. You'll hear it a little bit later. But I was, rattling off 20 frames a second. So let's look at some of the images that I got with the 400. This image, which is probably one of my favorite images of the day. Let's blow it up so you could see it. I just love it because it's nice and clean. There's the beautiful contrast of the bright red with the snowflakes and, of course, the expressions of the dogs. Now, again, here I'm at 2.8, choosing to show specifically either the dog or the musher, but this is probably one of my favorite images. Now, here's another image. Same thing, kind of focusing more on the dog. This is the guy that actually happened to win the race, number 14. So again, I wanted to kind of show both aspects with storytelling. The story is about the dog and the dogs racing, but it's also about the mushers. And then, of course, the two of them working together. So I was kind of just going back and forth between the two, shooting at 2.8. And again, you see all the things kind of out of focus on the ice behind him. There's people out there. There's quads out there. There's ice houses out there. Okay, this image, again, focusing a little bit more on the dogs as well. This guy or girl was kind of tucked down. But again, I wanted to kind of show the dog. And I love this image because just the one dog really is right in focus. And it really shows the spirit and the energy of these dogs and how much they absolutely love it. These dogs are well taken care of. There's vets on the site. This is not cruel to the dogs. These dogs absolutely love it. It's no different than your dog loving to play frisbee or ball and you go to the park. These dogs are spoiled beyond control. There's vet checks before the race, so just so everybody knows that. So I really wanted to try to show the passion of the animals as well. So the other lens that we're talking about in this episode is the 24-1.4. I wanted a complete contrast of the 400, plus I wanted some wider images, and I sort of envision like getting down low in the snow and shooting and kind of showing the whole scene and as the dogs go by. So let's look at me shooting some of those. I just moved to the other side of the track from where I just was because I noticed when I was shooting those frames, even though that I'm shooting raw, that the dogs were a little dark, you know, because they were backlit. I was on the other side. So now I moved to this side of the track, so when the next mushers come by, the dogs are gonna be lit really well. I'm gonna get down low again because I want that perspective. I'll wait for them to come to me. You know, I'll fire off a burst, probably 10, 15 shots, and there'll be something nice in there. The reason that I waited was because now I have a 24 millimeter on it. It's pretty wide. The way I framed it actually was I put the trail, this edge of the trail in one side of the frame and the other edge of the trail in the other. So the line sort of runs diagonally through the frame, and then I let the dogs and everything come into the frame. This is action, but in this case, I know exactly where they're gonna be. They're gonna be on this trail that's, you know, 2 feet away from me. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts for it. I just sit here and I wait. So that's another reason I can sort of put myself in that same spot and just wait for them to come to me. I want them to fill the frame. I mean, that's composition. So, you know, the lines are gonna lead your eye through it, and obviously the lines should go the same direction that the dogs are. So, I mean, composition, and if you shoot with they're too far away, I mean, it's just stuff you're gonna edit anyway. So, I mean, one of the things about becoming a better photographer, I think, is just simplifying what you do and being confident and knowing that, yeah, you can get the shot in 10 frames as opposed to start shooting when they're really too far away and you're gonna end up throwing those away anyway. I'm gonna go down low again, but what I did is I changed from like shooting like between 2.8 and f2, I'm at f11 because I want front of the back of the sled all in focus. Good, everything. Here we go. So you heard me talk quite a bit there about composition, especially when I switched to a wide lens. That was really important in that I wanted to fill the frame with the images, because with a 24, you don't want those pictures too small, and you know, you try to crop in and then you're losing a lot of the image. So I really wanted to wait, you know, in a lot of cases, even with the 400, you heard me say that, but I wanted to wait until I filled the frame. So let's look at some of those images. This first image was, I love this because the dog, as it came by, like took a look at me, like laying in the snow. I'm at, you know, 1.4, so, you know, the depth of field here, the dog's sharp, but the musher is out of focus. It was the last 2 dogs. Instead of trying to frame in the whole entire, like I had been doing, I wanted a little different look. So we did that. Let's just look at it a little bit bigger so you can see. But, you know, it's like the dog's smiling and looking right at me, you know, posing for a portrait. And then in this next image, I like the contrast here because the dogs had on blue shoes or socks, or I don't know, there's probably definitely a dog term for that, foot covers. But I really like the contrast here because you have the blue foot pads, you have the red jersey, you know, for the musher. And then again here, I did show the, you know, the first 2 dogs and then, you know, kind of more perspective. But look again how I filled the frame. You heard me talk a little bit about the track. You know, even though you could see the track where the snow is, the track, you know, it's diagonal through the frame. So your eye goes right through from closest to furthest away. You see the lake and the blue sky in the background. And again, I didn't want to just use the 400 all day or the 24. I wanted to give a couple different looks and perspectives. So that's all for this episode. Stay tuned for the second episode, and in the next episode, I'm going to show you images I shot with the 135 1.8 and then the 7200, which were the other 2 lenses that I chose to shoot that day. So I'm Robert Evans. This is part 1 of the Klondike Dog Sled Race, shooting the A92 and the 400 2.8 and the 24 1.4. Thanks for watching The Pixel Show. See you at episode 2.